Hello, today's lecture is about journalism ethics. Journalism ethics is different from, say, photojournalism law by the fact that it's not what you have to do, but it's rather what you should do. Journalism ethics falls into that gray area between the law and total anarchy. In general, what ethics is a system of beliefs that you follow. It could be based on a philosophy, it can be based on a systematic way of approaching the problem. It could be many different things, to religion, to just a gut feeling. But today we're going to talk about some issues that may arise when you are going out and shooting photos for anything that would be considered news, features, etc. First, people say that photos can't lie. Well, we know that they can. With the advent of Photoshop, photos are easily faked, and anyone who has a copy of Photoshop can make a reasonably good fake photo. Around for decades. Back in the Civil War, photographers would move bodies and weapons to make the scene look more dramatic. So in other words, lying to the people who saw the photo by manipulating what they were shooting. The Soviet Union was notorious for erasing people from photos when they fell into out of the sphere of the Soviet mindset, or when they died, just erase them from history, so to speak. So just because we have Photoshop now doesn't mean that fake photos haven't been around for a while. Now, just what you shoot as a photographer is an interpretation of reality, not the reality itself. So let's say you go into a city meeting and has the mayor up front with some of his administration, and let's say there's only 10 people there. You can go up there and shoot the photo in such a way that it looks like a large crowd. You show the people that are there, you show the mayor and his entourage, but you don't show all the empty seats behind. Or you can do the exact same thing. You can shoot from the back of the room and show that no one showed up to this meeting. So making that kind of decision, this interpretation of what you saw, will say what you are going to tell with this photo to the world. So what to shoot, what not to shoot, where to shoot from, what angles to shoot from, who to have in your photo, who not to have in your photo, what expressions were on the people's faces when you took the photos, or not, are expressions they didn't have. All those things can give the audience a different perception of what went on rather than an objective, unvarnished truth, if there's such thing as an objective, unvarnished truth. And then when you take a photo into a photo editing program like Photoshop, how you crop, the lightness and darkness, the contrast, the color balance, adding, subtracting, healing, taking blemishes off a person, removing tattoos, replacing a part of the photo that you cropped off accidentally with your camera. All these things is also an interpretation on what you saw when you were there, or maybe what you didn't see, what you decided to put in there with your editing software. So there's a lot of should you or shouldn't you when you're taking photos, when you're editing photos, and even when you're setting up a photo. Now, one of the problems with photojournalism is you often are trotting on people's misfortune. A car accident can make a great news item, but somebody may have been injured. The car obviously is not going to be in the same shape as it was before this accident. So your good fortune is someone else's misfortune. So you have to decide, are you going to take the photo or not? If you're doing this for a living, you may say, of course I'm taking the photo, this is how I make money. But at the same time, you have to balance that with other considerations, people's feelings, people's right to privacy, people's concern about publicity. So some things you should think about before you start taking photos is, should this moment be made public at all? And I know I've been in many situations where I think to myself, maybe this is too early to take the shots. I don't know enough about the situation. Or, obviously these are people who are in grief, so should I take the photos of them crying? And you have to decide beforehand where your line in the sand is. And we'll talk about that line in the sand in a little bit, but to me, my line in the sand, other than altering of reality, is someone going to be hurt in the future? And that's where I drew it. Will I cause further pain to these people? And if it's part of my job, well, I can interpret that reality. Maybe not show their face. Maybe not zoom in so close. Maybe focus on the first responders rather than the victims of the fire, the accident, or whatever the misfortune was. Of course, you don't want to be too intrusive. You don't want to step on people's toes, literally, to get these photos. So once again, thinking about these things beforehand, before jumping in and taking the photos, will really get you set ethically before you have to face that situation in reality. And it's always good to remember to be compassionate and sensitive, but at the same time balance it with the newsworthiness of the photo, the value of the photo as far as telling a story is concerned, which I've been talking about since the beginning of the semester. There is a strange kind of problem with our social media / we have a camera with us all the time type of present that we have, and that is, do you accept photos from citizens? Usually on that first big snow day, people send in snow from their backyard, and you get the cliched picture of the ruler and the snow on patio furniture that kind of shows how deep the snow is. It gets cliched very fast. But what about photos of, say, a crime? They happen to see a crime going on, they start taking the photos, they send it to you. Should you take it? To me, in the back of my mind is always, are these people being honest? Is there some way you can verify that this is a real photo, not something that they set up with their friends, or they photoshopped, or they took off the internet and changed the background to make you think that it's a local story. So I'd be very wary outside of the weather photos of using any photos from citizens. All right, when should you fake reality? Well, you really shouldn't. And as I said, my line in the sand is, are you trying to deceive someone? Are you trying to alter reality into making someone believe something was true that was not true when you took the photo? So did you tamper with reality before you took the photo? Are you back to Civil War days where you're moving bodies to get a better photo, the photo that you want? Are you telling people to stand in a certain place? Or are you moving objects so it can make the photo more dramatic? You shouldn't. It is what it is. Then after you've taken the photo, let's say you were taking pictures of a homecoming game, you were shooting the homecoming court, and you notice that the queen of the homecoming game had a blemish. Do you remove that? Do you keep it on? It was really there, but at the same time, the photo becomes a little bit more pleasing. Did it alter reality? In a very tiny way, but you're not really deceiving the audience. The story isn't about the blemish. It's not about the pimple. It's about who was in the homecoming court. So that's when you sit down and you think, am I deceiving people, or am I just trying to make this, a nice photo of a nice event? And of course, the hardness of the news comes into play here. If it's a hard news story like an accident or a crime or a fire, you're probably not going to do much altering of a photo. But if it's a soft story, it's a portrait, it's a cover photo, you're probably going to manipulate the photo a little bit to make it more pleasing. Now, I am I guess, strict believer in that you don't reenact anything or set up any shots. So let's say you missed a photo. People were unloading care packages for disaster victims, and you missed it. Don't have people go back into the truck and start unloading things again just so you have that photo. If you didn't get it at the time, that's too bad. Sorry for your luck. But you shouldn't reenact anything. And definitely don't say, hey, gee, I really want a picture of you guys unloading this stuff for these disaster victims. You go up here and you do this, you do that. When you start directing, that's when you've crossed that ethical line of deceiving your public. So, where is that line? I think it has to do with deceiving. Are you deceiving towards untruth, or you're deceiving toward miscellaneous, unimportant things, like removing a stray hair that came across someone's face? To me, that doesn't change the story. It doesn't change the reality. But setting up shots, reenacting shots, definitely. So what can you do with Photoshop? A lot. You can completely create situations that will be very believable just by taking bits and pieces from other photos or just creating it from a blank canvas. So what I believe is there's a line between pleasing and deceiving. Removing a blemish, removing something that's distracting in the photo that's small, that's pleasing. Adding a person who wasn't there, that's deceiving. So know where your line is. Think who your target audience is. I mean, if you are taking photos for a fashion magazine, well, that's a certain target audience who would expect you to remove blemishes from your model. If you're shooting for, say, Time or Newsweek, they're not expecting you to have doctored anything. So don't doctor anything. And also think about the nature of news between hard news and soft news. Hard news you're going to leave alone more than soft news. Once again, depending on what you shoot and what you don't shoot can not only change the point of view, but it can actually establish a political position. Since Donald Trump has taken office, you'll notice that a lot of newspapers show pictures of him where his face looks very angry, where he seems to be shouting at people, even if the reality of it was, at that moment, he wasn't shouting. He just happens to have one of those faces that, when he opens it too much, it looks like he's shouting. So just by doing that, picking and choosing which photos show Mr. Trump in a good light or a bad light can show your political position through images. You really don't want to do that. Stock photos are nice when you have nothing else. You see this a lot in advertising and public relations, more so than, say, the news industry. But it can get tricky. The same model that you use for promoting a blood donation, someone else in another publication could be using that same stock photo to illustrate domestic abuse. So try to stay away from stock photos. Shoot your own stock photos. And you can use them for illustration purposes, but I would use them really small, use inanimate objects, and always go with original work over than stock photos. All right, here's some infamous photo manipulation. O.J. Simpson, right after the wife of his body, the body of his wife, the other way around, was found to be slashed to death, and her friend, boyfriend, waiter, whatever you ever want to call, Ronald, forgot what his last name is. Oh, it doesn't matter. Anyway, when OJ was arrested, finally, after a very slow car chase, every magazine, from Sports Illustrated to Time, had the mugshot. And you can see here that the mugshot that Newsweek ran and every other publication ran was just the mugshot. Well, Time magazine did what they called a photo illustration. If you looked at the table of contents, at the bottom it said photo illustration blank. And what they wanted to do is put a political point of view on it, a social point of view on it, by making O.J. Simpson look more sinister. So, they gave him more of a 5 o'clock shadow, they darkened the photo, they put a dark edge around it, and it stood out on the news rack. I remember being at a magazine rack at the time going, what did Time do to this photo to have it so different from everyone else? And basically what they were trying to do is, well, they called it a cover illustration, but they were trying to deceive, and that's the problem. Ronald Goldman, by the way, just remembered. All right. If you go off to Egypt and you take a picture of the pyramids, you will never get this shot that National Geographic ran on their cover. Why? Because the pyramids are actually not in that position. They actually moved that back pyramid over quite a bit to line up this shot that they really liked. Yes, the camels in the foreground that are backlit, so you have the silhouette, that was there. The pyramid in the front, that was there. But that pyramid in the back just wasn't where it needed to be to balance out this photo. So they moved it. Is that being pleasing, or is it being deceiving? I think in this case it does cross the line into deceiving. Once again, Newsweek versus Time. This time it's actually Newsweek who did the photoshopping rather than Time. And before Octomom, there was the McCullough septuplets. And basically, when you have fertility drugs, you could come up with having lots and lots of babies. And Newsweek shot their own cover, and you see that on the left. Time shot their own also on the right. But it turns out that Mrs. Macaulay had some wonky teeth. So Newsweek went in there and actually gave her a nice straight line of teeth, while Time magazine didn't. Now, of course, Newsweek can say, oh no, she has a straight bottom set of teeth. No, it was photoshopped in. So, yeah, reality was altered once again. Does it really make a difference in this case? I don't think so, but at the same time, you need to be true to the truth. Covers again. Is Oprah Winfrey the richest woman on TV, as TV Guide states here? Yes, that's not the deceiving part, and yes, that is Oprah's head. Now, everything from the neck below is Anne Margaret. She was an actress in the 50s and 60s, known for being in Elvis movies. So they liked the photo that they had of her, added in a pile of money, darkened the skin tone, because Anne Margaret is a white woman. So everything about this photo is pretty much a lie. Now, this is an interesting story. It turns out that Bill Clinton and Fidel Castro did meet. Bill was giving a speech at the United Nations. Castro was giving a speech right afterward. And the press knew that at some point their paths were going to cross. Were they going to shake hands? Were they going to talk? What were they going to do? Well, cameras weren't permitted. The press really wasn't permitted behind the scenes. But it did turn out that, yes, Bill Clinton did shake hands with Fidel Castro. But no one from the media saw it, and no one from the media definitely took pictures of it. So the Daily News took it upon themselves to create this photo. Just took a picture of Bill Clinton, a picture of Fidel Castro, and then put in some hands in here and arms that really don't look all that great. It looks like a fake picture. So, real event? Yes. If you were at that event and saw them shake hands, did it look like this? Definitely not. All right, Wisconsin got in trouble with this. This is their alumni magazine on the left. And when they were looking at this photo, they said, oh, great, this shows a little bit of diversity at Wisconsin. You see the African-American fellow there on the left, about halfway down. Well, it turns out that he's from a stock photo. The actual photo that was taken is in the center. No diversity in there at all. So they took the photo on the right from a stock photo, photoshopped this fellow's face in there to try to deceive. And that's the last one for today on our ethics lecture. I hope you do think about some of these situations before you go out there. It's always best to have a systematic way of thinking about ethics, having ethics in place, a system of values before you have to face these situations in the professional world.